hi, hon. How are you doing?
Good. Just getting ready.
Oh, here. Can I?
No, not for you. This is for Frank.
Oh. Oh, my favorite.
Not for you. These are for Frank.
Okay. Okay, see you, hon. When's Frank coming? Pretty soon? Okay. Gotta get this stuff done. Boy, I'd sure like some of that stuff.
Don't touch those.
Okay.
I'm Frank Lee Anand, and I'll be your host and moderator for this discussion. Joining us are the world's favorite JW couple, Stephen and Gloria Morris, whom you'll all know from the wildly popular series.
Oh, well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the show. We got the studio all set up, and I did get a coffee, Frank. So Frank's online. So if you guys want to chat with Frank, please do. Now, Frank, we're going to play his. What is this? Your second last movie, right, Frank? The next movie is your swan movie, you call it. So we're going to be sad to see you go, Frank. You've been with us since what, 2011? Online, blogging. There's been a lot of work that Frank, if you haven't had a chance to go to the Watchtower Help site, just click on his icon there. I think it'll take you right to him. Or there will be a link at the bottom of the video. So today we are going to play the governing body's favorite sitcom. Yes, and we want to welcome the governing body. We know the governing body is online. They're in the background. Well, what do we see online there? Only 8 people. So one of those is the governing body, because there's probably only a couple online. So 10. Okay, a couple more governing bodies come online. 10 now. So we got a few more online. Should we wait for a bit? Okay, the governing body. Here's the guy. They're having trouble getting Stephen Lett on watching this, but everyone else really likes it. So Frank, you've been doing a wonderful job, and we're going to get right into the movie. So here we go. Here we go. Yeah, right there. Okay, I will go like that, and we'll play it.
Let's get real.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to JW Reality TV, Tell All. I'm Frank Lee Anand, and joining me in the studio are Stephen and Gloria Morris. And, assisting them off stage, their children, Galib and Sappho. This is part 4, the final episode in our series. In our previous episodes we examined the Watchtower's House of Cards, and eliminated all but the card supporting the doctrine which claims that the governing body is the faithful and discreet slave. We eliminated all support for that doctrine except for the prop of the year 1919, and eliminated all of that year's support except for the year 1914. This episode will be devoted to examining what support there may be for their doctrines regarding the year 1914. 1919, the year the Watchtower claims to have been judged the faithful and discreet slave, depends upon the year 1914. What other significance does 1914 have, Stephen?
That was the year that saw the end of the Gentile times, as Jesus assumed his kingly power and hurled Satan out of heaven to the earth, which began the last days. And Jesus said that the generation that witnessed those events would not die before the end came.
Thanks, Stephen. Now, looking at our first card in support of 1914, we see the year 607 BCE. What is the significance of that year?
That was the year when God's kingdom on earth, Israel, really just Judah at that time, with its capital Jerusalem, was taken captive to Babylon, to be suppressed for 7 times, or 2,520 years, until being re-established as a spiritual kingdom over the earth in 1914. This was all prophesied in the book of Daniel and was discerned prior to 1914 by the Watchtower's founder, Charles Taze Russell.
Now, Gloria, I understand that there is some controversy over this date.
That's correct, Frank. It's only the Watchtower, rewriting history to fit its own interpretations, that believes 607 was the year that Babylon conquered Jerusalem. All archaeologists and historians acknowledge the year to have been 20 years later, in 587 BCE.
Okay, we'll come back to this topic. Let's move on to the next card, Neb's dream. What's that all about?
In Daniel chapter 4 we have a description of a dream that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had. In the dream he saw an angel descend from heaven and chop down a mighty tree. The tree stump was then banded to prevent its growth, and the angel declared that 7 times would pass over it. Daniel interpreted the dream for Nebuchadnezzar as follows. The tree, O king, is you, Daniel told him. And he would go mad, be driven from men, and eat grass in the field with the animals for 7 times, until he acknowledged Jehovah as God, at which time his kingdom would be restored to him. That all happened to Nebuchadnezzar, exactly as in the dream and Daniel's interpretation.
Okay. But what does that have to do with 607 BCE or 1914 CE?
Well, I guess that brings us to the next card, type and antitype. You see, the Watchtower has discerned that many of the things recorded in the Bible had both a typical and an antitypical fulfillment. We saw this already in how the Babylonian captivity and release of the Jews prefigured Rutherford's imprisonment and release. So too, Nebuchadnezzar's dream had its typical fulfillment in his going mad and eating grass in the field for 7 times. In its antitypical fulfillment, we see that it prophesied the 7 times between the Babylonian captivity of 607 BCE, representing the suppression of God's kingdom on earth, and the restoration of God's kingdom in 1914 by Jesus assuming his kingship role in that year.
Yes, the Watchtower publications, especially Rutherford's books, used to be jam-packed with these antitypes. But more recently they've admitted this wasn't very discreet. Sappho?
From the March 15, 2015 Watchtower, starting on page 9, paragraph 7, if you have been serving Jehovah for decades, you may have noticed a gradual shift in the way our literature explains many of the narratives recorded in the Bible. How so? In times past, it was more common for our literature to take what might be called a type-antitype approach to scriptural accounts. As we might expect, over the years Jehovah has helped the faithful and discreet slave to become steadily more discreet. Discretion has led to greater caution when it comes to calling a Bible account a prophetic drama unless there is a clear scriptural basis for doing so.
Since Nebuchadnezzar's dream already had its fulfillment, as interpreted by Daniel, under inspiration, and the scriptures do not teach that this individual, event, or object is typical of something else, then, following the Watchtower's own rule, we shouldn't treat it as a prophetic drama with an antitypical fulfillment, since there is no clear scriptural basis for doing so. In a similar instance, recorded in Genesis 40 verse 8, Joseph was asked by Pharaoh to interpret his dream. Joseph told him, "Do not interpretations belong to God?" Likewise, in Daniel 2 verses 27 to 28, Daniel indicated that his interpretations came directly from God. Any other so-called prophets were unable to interpret these dreams because they were not inspired by God to do so. The governing body has attempted to interpret this dream as well. Yet, they have not been inspired by God with that ability. Sappho?
The governing body is neither inspired nor perfect. It can make mistakes when explaining the Bible. Watchtower, February 2017, pages 26 through 27. I guess that's why the Watchtower's uninspired antitypical fulfillment is so wrong, that it actually contradicts the Bible's inspired interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream.
What do you mean, it contradicts it?
Daniel clearly states that the tree represents Nebuchadnezzar, a Gentile ruler. So, whatever antitypical fulfillment the Watchtower attempts, it has to at least have the tree and Nebuchadnezzar representing the same thing. But it doesn't, it has them representing two radically different things. The Watchtower claims that the tree represents God's kingdom, which was Israel at the time, while Nebuchadnezzar represents Gentile rulership. You can't get more opposite than that.
And, since Nebuchadnezzar was the one who conquered Judah and led the people captive to Babylon, if the Watchtower's antitypical interpretation is correct, he would take the place of the angel cutting down the tree, a tree representing himself, according to Daniel. But the Watchtower interpretation muddles things even further, mixing the fulfillment of Daniel's interpretation of the dream with the prophetic dream itself. Nebuchadnezzar does not appear in the dream only in its fulfillment, as the embodiment of the symbolic tree. The Watchtower takes a little from here and a little from there to piece together their crazy doctrine. Nebuchadnezzar, as a madman, off his throne, and grazing in the field like an animal, they say, represents Gentile kingdoms ruling the earth for 7 times. That's right, a Gentile king who had his kingdom taken away from him, and who is not ruling for 7 times, is made to represent Gentile kings ruling for 7 times.
I can't help but notice that this interpretation also contradicts the Watchtower's own interpretation of the Israelites' Babylonian captivity. As Stephen just mentioned, and as we saw in the previous episode, their antitypical fulfillment of the capture and release of Judah prefigured the Bible students having preached in sackcloth and Rutherford's imprisonment and subsequent release from prison. Events that took place between 1914 and 1919, less than 5 years, not 7 times, or 2,520 days or years. They can't sensibly use the same event to prefigure 2 different events with different time spans.
Sure they can publish any nonsense they like, since they admit that they are prone to making mistakes when explaining the Bible. They can deny the facts, be illogical, nonsensical, and self-contradictory. It doesn't matter, because their followers are told that they must believe whatever the governing body says, even if it makes no sense to them.
Hey, I just looked it up, and humans cannot survive for years on a grass diet. Nebuchadnezzar would have died of malnutrition after a few weeks at the most.
The New World Translation says he ate vegetation. People can live quite well on a vegetarian diet.
That's the only translation that says vegetation, isn't it, Dad?
Yes. As I told you, it's the most accurate.
Oh, please. The whole legend of Nebuchadnezzar's tree dream is obviously just a morality tale, with the moral being, avoid hubris or God will cut you down to size until you acknowledge how great he is. That's all it is. It wasn't meant to be a hidden antitypical prophecy about the year 1914.
Well, the governing body has declared that it is, and they are more of an authority than anyone here, since they are Jehovah's faithful and discreet slave.
Hold on there, Stephen. That's circular reasoning. We're looking at these cards as support for that very claim. You can't turn it around and claim these cards are correct because of what they are meant to prove.
I guess not, at least for anyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness. But then let's look at it from another angle. We've seen the antitypical fulfillment come true. So there's your proof. Judah was conquered by Babylon in 607 BCE, and the Gentile times ended 7 times later, which equals 2,520 years, in 1914 CE, when Jesus assumed kingly power and became present as king. We have all the signs he gave to prove it.
Since you brought it up, what exactly do you mean by the Gentile times?
The 7 times, which equals the 2,520-year period in which Gentile rulers have been unhindered by God's kingdom on earth. Galib?
Prior to Nebuchadnezzar's conquest of Jerusalem, the typical kingdom of God ruling out of that city was the agency by which Jehovah expressed his rightful sovereignty toward the earth. It thus constituted a divine block or impediment for Nebuchadnezzar in attaining his goal of world domination. By allowing that typical kingdom at Jerusalem to be overthrown, Jehovah permitted his own visible expression of sovereignty through the Davidic dynasty of kings to be cut down. the expression and exercise of world domination in the kingdom of mankind, unhindered by any representative kingdom of God, now passed into the hands of the Gentile nations. Insight on the Scriptures, Volume 1, page 134. So, he was king of the universe for nearly 2,000 years, but sat on his butt, letting Gentiles rule the earth all that time, wreaking whatever havoc they liked in his kingdom?
Well, yes, he followed God's timetable.
God's timetable, or the watchtowers? Because we're just about to show that this timetable of yours is totally bogus.
It's not bogus, we predicted World War I would occur in 1914. That, along with the other signs of the last days, prove we were right, and that Satan was hurled down to the earth at that time, which is why things have gotten so bad on earth since that year.
The Watchtower did not predict World War I. Prior to 1914, the Watchtower held that Jesus' presence occurred not in 1914, but in 1874, and he assumed his kingly power in 1878. This was their teaching until 1930. They preached that the last days began not in 1914, but in 1799, which they then claimed was the worst time in all history. Until about 1911, they believed that Armageddon had begun in 1874 and would end in 1914, along with the last days. This was all stated as something definite. However, nothing they predicted came true. And so they ended up moving everything, except Armageddon, to 1914, which remains their belief to this day.
Wait a minute, Mom. Can we go back to their old timeline for a minute? Here's what gets me. They thought they felt Jesus' presence from 1874 to 1913. For 39 years they preached this as an indisputable fact, for which there was not the slightest room for doubt. All that time when he wasn't present, in that sense, at all, during those years.
Well, yes, that's correct.
I guess something was out of whack with their Jesus detecting apparatus. Makes one suspicious of their claiming to know now that Jesus is present since 1914.
Exactly. Today, don't they claim it's an indisputable fact that his presence began in 1914?
Correct. Governing body member Stephen Lett recently affirmed just how certain they are.
God's kingdom has been ruling in the heavens, as we've discussed during this convention, for 100 years. And it has produced tremendous effects, tremendous results. In fact, there is more evidence confirming the existence of the kingdom than the evidence that would convince us that there's gravity, electricity, wind.
Their certainty, in the face of having been wrong about this for 39 years, reminds me of my favorite Watchtower quote concerning 1914.
The year 1925 is a date definitely and clearly marked in the scriptures, even more clearly than that of 1914. Watchtower, July 15, 1924, page 211.
Stephen, what was supposed to happen in 1925 that the Watchtower was so damn sure about?
They thought Abraham and the other ancient worthies would be resurrected in that year.
Did that happen?
No. But it will someday.
They were more certain of that date than of 1914. They were wrong about 1925, so doesn't that greatly reduce their credibility when it comes to the 1914 doctrine?
Not for me.
I didn't get to finish my point. For 39 years the Watchtower was saying, look. He's here. Jesus Christ is present. All the while, they now say, he wasn't present. So, weren't they exactly fulfilling this scripture? Then, too, if anyone says to you, see, here's the Christ, or, see, there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise. Mark 13 verse 21. In Luke's account, 17:23, he goes on to say, do not follow them. That's one biblical admonition that you really should live by, Dad, don't follow false prophets.
Oh, that was just a mistake of Russell's. We've since determined that he wasn't the faithful slave, so it's a moot point.
No, it wasn't just Russell. Up until 1930 Rutherford also believed and preached that Jesus was present from 1874 on.
So, since the Bible shows him to have been a false prophet, Why would Jesus judge Rutherford to be the faithful slave?
I guess Jesus was willing to forgive their mistake and overlook it. So, we should do the same.
And follow the men whom Jesus identified in the Bible as the very ones not to follow? Your Jesus contradicts the biblical Jesus.
Stephen, you seem stumped. So, let's try something I think you'll be able to answer. If 1914 was the end of the Gentile times, and Jesus has been ruling the earth from heaven since then, why do we still have Gentile governments calling all of the shots? Why is there not peace on earth, goodwill towards men under Jesus' rulership?
Oh yes, that I can answer. Jesus foretold that there would be wars and other troubles during the time of the end because he hurled Satan down to the earth at that time. Satan knows he has a short time left, so he's causing as much trouble as he can. That's why it's called the time of trouble. These things are the signs of the last days. They prove our point, not defeat it.
But I thought you believed that the serpent back in the Garden of Eden was Satan. So, wasn't he already on earth prior to 1914?
Yes, but he was able to roam heaven and earth prior to 1914. After that year he was banished from heaven.
Satan was in heaven.
Oh, yes.
I guess there's hope for me as well, then.
But wait, isn't Satan a fallen angel?
Yes. He was formerly Lucifer, an angel of light. But he sinned against God and became Satan, the devil.
But 2 Peter 2 verse 4 says that the angels who sinned had already been cast out of heaven, into pits of darkness. Certainly God did not refrain from punishing the angels who sinned, but threw them into Tartarus, putting them in chains of dense darkness to be reserved for judgment. So, how could Jesus have hurled Satan from heaven in 1914 when God had already thrown Satan out, thousands of years before, and chained him up in the dark?
I don't know.
Since you don't know, and neither does the Watchtower, it seems to me that far from there being more evidence than for gravity, your 1914 doctrine has no evidence whatsoever.
Oh, yes it does. The signs of the last days that Jesus gave. We're seeing all these signs since 1914.
Those signs were for the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, as the Watchtower has admitted.
Since Peter addressed natural Jews and Jewish proselytes, his words must have had particular reference to them and evidently indicated that they were living in the last days of the then existing Jewish system of things, with its center of worship at Jerusalem. Earlier, Christ Jesus himself had foretold the destruction of Jerusalem and its temple, which occurred in 70 CE. Insight on the Scriptures, Volume 2, page 206 under the topic, Last Days.
However, the Watchtower has once again played its anti-typical fulfillment card. They claim that the signs of the last days also apply to our time.
It is the last days, not of the physical world, but of the present wicked system of things, which is made up of all organizations of men that refuse to submit to God's direction. Yes, all earthly governments of mankind in opposition to God's kingdom will be destroyed. Are we now living in the last days of this worldly system of things? Yes, we are. In recent years, Christian witnesses of Jehovah God have been sounding the warning that time is running out, that these last days will soon conclude with a destruction comparable to the global flood of Noah's day. Watchtower, March 15, 1967, pages 165 through 168. Time was running out, they warned. Yet that quote is from a Watchtower over half a century ago. Hardly as urgent as they made it out to be.
But, according to the Bible itself, the anti-typical fulfillment card can't be applied to the last days.
For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the world's beginning until now, no, nor will occur again. Matthew 24 verse 21.
According to Jesus' own words, there, the Great Tribulation, which witnesses expect any day now, referred to the events of 70 CE and would never occur again.
But World War I. Earthquakes. Famine. Crime. Not to mention the preaching work in all the inhabited earth that the witnesses are accomplishing today.
World War I is a misnomer. It was originally called the Great War because there were world wars before 1914, as well as wars with more casualties. For instance, the 7 Years' War of 1756 was a world war, as were the Napoleonic Wars from 1792 to 1815, which were fought on all continents, not just Europe. And the Taiping Rebellion of 1850 to 1864 resulted in about 4 times as many deaths as the War of 1914. There have always been earthquakes. It is a daily occurrence, and has been long before we ever started recording them. Even the Watchtower has admitted this.
In other words, the Earth and its dynamic forces have more or less remained the same throughout the ages. Watchtower, December 1st, 1993, page 6.
But the Watchtower has resorted to deception to make it appear that earthquakes have increased since 1914.
The severity and deadliness of earthquakes have increased markedly since the time of the end commenced for this old system in 1914. In fact, over 900,000 persons have died from earthquakes in this century. Watchtower, May 1st, 1970, page 270.
But, according to Collier's Encyclopedia, the majority of those deaths actually occurred prior to 1914, disproving their point. The same can be said regarding famine and crime. They've always been with us, but are no worse today than prior to 1914. In fact, according to the Wikipedia article on famine, the loss of lives from famine has shown a drastic reduction since 1980. It is human nature to think that conditions are worse than they've ever been. Christians have been claiming this for nearly 2,000 years, each generation convinced that they're living in the last days.
That we are living in the last days, and consequently, in the dawn of the new age, are facts not only discernible by the close student of the Word, led by the Spirit, but the outward signs recognizable by the world bear the same testimony. Be fully awake to the fact. That's from page 1 of the July 1st Watchtower of 1879. A time when, according to the Watchtower today, the last days had not yet begun.
It sounds like they were just as sure that they were living in the last days back then as they are now. Since they were wrong then, why should we trust that they're right, now?
Good point, Galeb. I can't think of a single reason.
Actually, believe it or not, an objective view reveals that the present day is the best time to be alive. The past has been so egregiously violent that this is the most peaceful time in history. Ask yourself, is there any other time in the past that you'd rather be alive? With a much reduced life expectancy, lack of medical knowledge, rampant illiteracy, ignorance, prejudice, and superstition. A 40-hour workweek was unheard of. Just to scrape by, people labored from morning till night. There were no rights for women, or child labor laws.
And, as for preaching, the Bible says that had already been accomplished back in the 1st century, prior to 70 CE.
That good news that you heard and that was preached in all creation under heaven. Colossians 1 verse 23.
So that sign was already fulfilled, and doesn't require any further fulfillment.
Much less by Jehovah's Witnesses preaching their false prophecies.
Then I'm crossing out the signs card. Next is the generation card. But we're out of time for this episode. We're going to take a break and have the final part of the last episode next time. You won't want to miss the exciting conclusion and see whether the Watchtower's house of cards stands or falls.
There we go. Now I'm on. Well, thank you very much, Frank. That was a great job of that video. I'm just going to rewind.
Galeb and Sappho.
And
1919.
yeah, I learned a lot. That was the first time I watched this, so I was watching it along with the audience. Here's a great tool that we can use online in helping people to understand what's happening. Now, I used one of Frank's videos the other day. I used a piece of it I did a video on blood. And so I used a piece of that video on blood because I can't explain it any better than that video. So when we think of all the work that Frank has done here, I want to see if I can put the video back up here. Just hold on for a second. There we go. So I was just going through this. All these illustrations, really good job. Now there's one point I thought, and I know I'm going to be going through this and using it now here, right here.
Sappho?
The governing body is neither inspired nor perfect. It can make mistakes when explaining the Bible. Watchtower, February 2017, pages 26 through 27.
Now, this is that article. You guys can see that on the page there. This is what they're saying now at the 2023 annual meeting, is they're getting up and they're reiterating this. Now, I did not know. I guess this slipped past a lot of us, but this is before I woke up. I don't know. Obviously, Frank didn't miss this point. And some on our comments were mentioning this, that this was an old point, that they had already admitted that they were infallible, that they were fallible, not infallible. So what do they say here? The governing body is neither inspired nor perfect. It can make mistakes when explaining the Bible or directing the organization. For example, the Watchtower publication includes a subject Beliefs Clarified, which lists adjustments to our understanding of the Bible since 1870. And Jesus did not tell us that his faithful slave would produce perfect spiritual food. So how can we answer Jesus' question, who really is a faithful, discreet slave? What evidence is there that the governing body is? Well, let us consider the same three things that helped So they're doing the same thing. They're just reiterating this same magazine at the general meeting. Why? I think because since this was 2017, well, it was 2015 that they were in the Royal Commission, and Jackson admitted in the court. This blew everyone away. A lot of people left the organization because of his statement. And he was asked by the courts, are you the only channel that God's chosen to use? And Jackson's up there and he says, no, that would be presumptuous for us to say that we're the only chosen ones. You know, for God is working through the Christian congregation, through others. Now, he was trying to go and say God is working through Jehovah's Witnesses. And what he's trying to say by not saying is that they have a writing committee that actually does it all for them. And they're just a business. And they just all vote on whether we're going to accept this or not. So I think since that was 2015, 2 years later, they come out with this article. They admit it in this article. They know that the apostates are online showing all the mistakes they've made. So let's just admit it. So they all got together and admitted it. It even shows them in a little meeting here talking about it, if that's what this is. But that's what they're trying to show us. But then on the other hand, they're saying, but, you know, there is really a faithful and discreet slave, which they take a question mark. They take one piece of that out. And I think we'll look that up. But anyways, that's really good, Frank. I was wondering where that article was. I don't have to do the research now. So thumbs up on that one. Now, what was the other point? Read the comments. Okay, comments. So Frank is saying this was in an article trying to prove that they were the slave. One of their proofs, they make mistakes. Yes, very good. And that's excellent. I like how that whole video went, and it kind of shows the kids are showing what's going on. So let me carry on here. Mixing. I like all these illustrations. They're really good. Now I'm waiting for that house of cards to fall over. I guess that's the last video. Now, I thought that was really current too, Frank, that you got that in there on the that Watchtower, because that's on the 2023 annual meeting. It's late. They're talking about this again. This whole part of being a JW, I found was really difficult. How do you explain that stuff, right? So yeah, that's a good point. Their get out of jail card for many years is we're not infallible. We make mistakes. So that's what they're clutching on. But how does this whole new light? It just doesn't make sense. I think this has to be starting to wake a lot more people up, or else the indoctrination's really thick. Sherry says the JWs are nothing more than just another man-made denomination of a Sunday church. Watchtower says they need to realize that being the slave is another one of their mistakes, the biggest one. So yes, for sure. So yeah, they have, one of the things I could never understand, and thanks a lot, Frank, for doing that. When I was a Jehovah's Witness, I had a heck of a time explaining this 1914 thing. And so I just never did. But, some of us were real JWs and some were just in there. But I just thought it didn't make sense. This was the best explanation from the JW side, because it explains both sides, how the JWs think and where they get their information from. And then it comes back, we step back and we look at this from history and from a logical standpoint of view. It just doesn't make sense, this whole thing. So nicely done. We can go over this as people wake up, and we can use this information over and over again. We, as creators, thanks, Frank, because it helps us on our channel and others to wake up. And this information really makes a lot of sense. Now, this here one, I laughed. Good thing I have when this one was on, I laughed because Stephen Lett, that's why, where are we here? See, here. Stephen Lett didn't want to go because he's on TV here. That's a young picture of Stephen Lett with he's kind of got this Anthony Robbins look. He's a lot slimmer there. Yeah, that must be an older picture, but some of this information is just tremendous. When you put it down and you hear it from the horse's mouth, how they say that. He's going on to say there's more evidence confirming. Let's just hear that again. This is just crazy.
Fact that his presence began in 1914?
Correct. Governing body member Stephen Lett recently affirmed just how certain they are.
God's kingdom has been ruling in the heavens, as we've discussed during this convention, for 100 years. And it has produced tremendous effects, tremendous results. In fact, there is more evidence confirming the existence of the kingdom than the evidence that would convince us that there's gravity, electricity, wind.
There's
Yeah, I laughed. Like, can you believe that? There's more to get up on stage. This looks like an assembly part. Frank, maybe you can help us out. When is this? When did he tell this part? Maybe you said it there and I missed it. But anyways, getting up in front of the world, these guys are rock stars, right? Everyone. But I guess they put that thing in the magazine that says there, I'm swatting at these flies. I guess they put that thing in the magazines. Well, we make mistakes. And so now they can kind of get up and say whatever they want just to be the rock stars. The end's coming, whatever they want. They're talking right now about the war in Israel. That's on their website, all over their website. The last two articles, we're probably going to run another video on that. So yeah, it's crazy, isn't it, these guys? Jackie says he obviously doesn't realize that gravity is just a theory. Sherry says, hey, whatever happened to that tennis lady? Oh, you're on to something else. Anyways, this is interesting. What else do we have here? Right here.
Even more clearly than that of 1914. Watchtower, July 15th, 1924, page 211.
Stephen, what was supposed to happen in
Like I was looking back here. Is that your personal copy, Frank? Like it looks like it's highlighted, like you highlighted that. Or is that, can you actually make the highlighter like that on the computer? Maybe you can. Really looks like your own copy, but
Scriptures, even more clearly than that of 1914. Watchtower, July 15, 1924, page 211.
I didn't
Stephen, what
realize
was
that.
supposed to happen?
I didn't realize that they put all of that on 1925. That was a learning too. You see, for a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, we don't have a clue because the Watchtower leaves all this stuff out. They don't talk about the history because the history would make them look really bad.
In 1925.
Now, I was just going on here.
Now say, he wasn't present. So, weren't they exactly fulfilling this scripture? Didn't get to finish my point.
Right here.
For 39 years the Watchtower was saying, look. He's here. Jesus Christ is present. All the while, they now say, he wasn't present. So, weren't they exactly fulfilling this scripture? Then, too, if anyone says to you, see, here's the Christ, or, see, there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise. Mark 13 verse 21. In Luke's account, 17:23, he goes on to say, do not follow them. That's one biblical admonition that you really should live by, Dad, don't follow false prophets.
Oh, that was just a mistake of Russell's. We've since determined that he wasn't the faithful slave, so it's a moot point.
No, it wasn't just Russell. Up until 1930 Rutherford also believed and preached that Jesus was present from 1874 on.
So, since the Bible shows him to have been a false prophet, why would Jesus judge Rutherford to be the faithful slave?
I guess Jesus was willing to forgive their mistake and overlook it. So, we should do the same.
And follow the
So I thought that was a really good point, Frank. This just reemphasizes all of the mistakes that they've made trying to predict dates. And then that whole 607 thing, I thought you did a really good job of breaking that apart, how a JW thinks about that and how we have to sit back and really look at it. These are all fables. They're all stories. And the Watchtower is trying to make them all prophetic and make them all translate over to Rutherford. Everything seems to be Rutherford, a lot of Rutherford worship. So that's kind of interesting. Now, what do we have there? Frank is saying, that was 2014 International Convention in Australia. So that's a few years back. Looked a lot different. They originally said 1874, 1875 was the 6,000 years of man's existence. Any bets on 2075? If they're around, I don't know how this organization is going to be around that much longer. But you know how these things are. Who knows? The governments start tackling them all over the world. They should. They're losing memberships. They're losing numbers. So that's I don't know. It could be just one of these religions of the past. That's what we're hoping. And but whatever. So anyways, let's go on and follow men who Jesus identified. So we come further here. I like how and you're really fair about it.
On Earth prior to 1914.
Yes, but he was able to roam heaven and earth prior to 1914. After that year he was banished from heaven.
Satan was in heaven.
I thought Frank really did a good job of allowing the Jehovah's Witness to like say everything that a Jehovah's Witness could even think about. Like this Stephen here, he actually spoke like a very good, well-educated Jehovah's Witness. He knows more than I know about the Jehovah's Witness religion. And this gives us, and then once you hear it again, you know, it's like listening to some elder that's really good, that really knows the religion. And you know how when you're out in the ministry and you run into someone that wants to know how to explain 1914, you say, yeah, you know, I'm kind of running a little late here. I'm gonna write you down. I got that all figured out, and I'll. When do you want to do that? So then you go back and you phone up. Hey, you phone up that elder pioneer. Hey, you know how you explain that? You want to come with me on a call? And they're all, oh yeah, because they feel good about it, that they know how to explain this stuff, like Stephen. And you get there, and you just kind of sit there and watch them. Most times the householders don't know a thing about the Bible, and that's the problem. Is you just sit there and you just think you just kind of halfway believe some of this garbage because you don't know enough about the Bible. But what I like about this video, this is I think how we have to be as people. There's so much information out there in deciphering information, realizing that that the Bible is a book of, it's a storybook. My book of Bible stories. It's exactly it. And if we take all of these things literal, we're going to run into trouble, because you can't. These are fables. There's lessons. Like I thought it was good how it was brought out in the video. The tree. It's a lesson. God's going to chop the tree down. You learn from these lessons, and that's all you can do with this stuff. So a really nice job. Now I'm just going to go further here. Talking about the angels. That was a good point too. I never thought of that. Let's just hear this again. This was different.
Isn't Satan a fallen angel?
Yes. He was formerly Lucifer, an angel of light. But he sinned against God and became Satan, the devil.
But 2 Peter 2 verse 4 says that the angels who sinned had already been cast out of heaven, into pits of darkness. Certainly God did not refrain from punishing the angels who sinned, but threw them into Tartarus, putting them in chains of dense darkness to be reserved for judgment. So, how could Jesus have hurled Satan from heaven in 1914 when God had already thrown Satan out, thousands of years before, and chained him up in the dark?
I don't know.
Since you don't know,
I don't know. I love it. Because how do you answer that? That was brilliant. That was brilliant, Frank. How you make the child do it. You make the child. This is child stuff, Frank. This is or Stephen. This is child stuff. So I love it. I love how you did that. And it's how do you make sense of some of this 1914 doctrine? You can't. The children can't. Not today's children. So let's just go on here.
and neither does the Watchtower. It seems to me that far from there being more evidence than for gravity, your 1914 doctrine has no evidence whatsoever.
Oh, yes it does. The signs of the last days that Jesus gave.
I thought these were some good points on. I never thought of it like this, that the last days would have that. Like in our time, there's less hunger. Of course, we're farming all over the world. When one country has a shortage, the other country is in. We have these world food banks, I guess, so to speak. But yeah, we're living in a time. And that's another good thing I thought you brought out, Frank, is about pick a time that you'd like to live in the past. Most of us would say, I really don't think there's a time that I want to live in the past. Right now, I'm happy with most of us. So here's a comment from Frank. He says, Sappho thought of that one. I never realized it before either. Right. Frank, we know you put this all together, but there's a lot of, like, from a creator's point of view, there's a lot of scripting that went into this movie, a lot of work. Maybe it comes natural to you, Frank, but I think there's thousands and thousands of hours. And we really want to thank you as a community for all of this work. Now, I just want to carry on a little bit. He says, here's a good point in the video, I thought.
We're seeing all these signs since 1914.
Those signs were for the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, as the Watchtower has admitted.
Since Peter addressed natural Jews and Jewish proselytes, his words must have had particular reference to them and evidently indicated that they were living in the last days of the then existing Jewish system of things, with its center of worship at Jerusalem. Earlier, Christ Jesus himself had foretold the destruction of Jerusalem.
So what I like about the video is that you're bringing the and this really helps ex-Jehovah's Witnesses coming out. and it's bringing us back to the Watchtower, because that's what we're used to reading all the time. So if we can go to the Watchtower and see how they contradict themselves, and then we see, especially now, we see where they say, oh, yeah, we made a, they're making it like it's no big deal. Oh, yeah, we made mistakes in the past. Oh, yeah, a lot of people died, but the light wasn't here, man. It wasn't new light. We got new light now, and people don't have to die. We can do organ transplants now. Blood's not an organ, though. You can't yeah. And blood is an organ. It's like an organ transplant. I think that was brought up in some other videos. But very interesting how you're using their information, the Watchtower, and this is really going to help a lot of people. And you're using a lot, I think that's using their Bible, the New World Translation, too.
Warned. Yet that quote is from a Watchtower over half a century ago. Hardly as urgent as they made it out to be.
But, according to the Bible itself, the anti-typical fulfillment card can't be applied to the last days.
And that was a big one. This parallel, they'd always parallel everything, an anti-typical fulfillment. Everything was parallel to Rutherford. All the horns blowing in Revelation is a parallel to one of Rutherford's assemblies. You talk about idol worship. Like, this religion is just full of idolizing these men. And then they come out and say, well, we're not prophets. We don't even we're not inspired. Like, it's just, how could you want to stay in there? But I guess I was in it for all those years. So.
For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the world's beginning until now, no, nor will occur again. Matthew 24 verse 21.
According to Jesus' own words, there, the Great Tribulation, which witnesses expect any day now, referred to the events of 70 CE.
Yeah, and they fling that out. Remember when we were JWs, we'd fling that out all the time, the Great Tribulation, Great Tribulation. We'd fling that scripture out. We knew nothing about it. This really helped to understand that this was all done. This was all done way back in Jesus' time. And the spreading and getting the news out back in his day, they got it out to all these countries, and then all of these Christian religions formed. So very well done. It brought it to a different thinking, I think. For me, it did anyways.
And would never occur again.
But World War I, earthquakes, famine, crime. Not to mention the preaching work in all the inhabited earth that the witnesses are accomplishing today.
World War I is a misnomer. It was originally called the Great War because there were world wars before 1914, as well as wars with more casualties. For instance, the 7 Years' War of 1756 was a world war, as were the Napoleonic.
This was new to me. I remember as a Jehovah's Witness, they brainwashed us to think that the World War I and II were, killed the most people in the whole world. And, you could read a lot of Watchtower Awake magazines on that. But here, the research is that no, there was other wars way before then. And I thought of that later too, all the way through history, like the Bible is just full of wars. The nations have been warring since the beginning of man. So it becomes a weak argument.
Wars from 1792 to 1815, which were fought on all continents, not just Europe. And the Taiping Rebellion of 1850 to 1864 resulted in about 4 times as many deaths as the War of 1914. There have always been earthquakes. It is a daily occurrence, and has been long before we ever started recording them. Even the Watchtower has admitted this.
In other words, the Earth and its dynamic forces have more or less remained the same throughout the ages.
Now, I thought that was interesting. I missed that. For all these years, I was led to believe by the Watchtower, or at least by people giving public talks and going to assemblies, that we live in the time that there's the most earthquakes, the most this, the most that. But right here in their own Watchtower, they've admitted that these earthquakes have been happening forever. The same. They're the same throughout the ages. They admit that. So that was a new learning that this is interesting when you can take the Watchtower back to their own words, because they can't lie everywhere and they can't keep track of all their lies. That's a problem. they're a business, and they're trying to trap people in their thinking to believe that they're special, and that you should leave your estate and give them money without tithing. You know, they don't want to be like the rest of the religions, but now they're shooting for more. They're shooting for your wills and everything.
Watchtower, December 1st, 1993, page 6.
But the Watchtower has resorted to deception to make it appear that earthquakes have increased since 1914.
The severity and deadliness of earthquakes have increased markedly since the time of the end commenced for this old system in 1914. In fact, over 900,000 persons have died from earthquakes.
So that's interesting in one sense, and this is what Watchtower does. In one sense, in one breath, we're the faithful slave, we're from God, we're inspired. And then in the next sense, we make mistakes, we're fallible, we're not inspired, don't believe us, basically. So, and they do that in their articles. They hop back and forth. In this article, they claim that earthquakes have marked the time of the end. And this is how I always believed that they preached it. So I didn't realize that they admitted in the other article that they've been going on forever.
Quakes in this century.
Same rate.
Watchtower, May 1st, 1970, page 270.
But, according to Collier's Encyclopedia, the majority of those deaths actually occurred prior to 1914, disproving their point. The same can be said regarding famine and crime. They've always been with us, but are no worse today than prior to 1914. In fact, according to the Wikipedia article on famine, the loss of lives from famine has shown a drastic reduction since 1980.
That is an excellent point. So take some of that on your tablet. Take this video, it's just on Frank's site, and make sure you subscribe to it. And when you're walking past the cart people, and they want to talk about the last days, pull some of this stuff up. And so that Wikipedia, this is right on Wikipedia, and Watchtower, if they want to argue it, they can, but they can't. So it's interesting what a farce how they're using the Bible. And it's not just the Watchtower, it's a lot of religions are using the Bible in this manner to get money out of people. And they do a little bit for the poor, maybe lots of religions, but they don't do a lot. If you want to really help the poor, the food banks and places like that help the most. They have the highest, from the research I've done, the food banks have the highest star ratings here in Canada anyways. And I would assume, but none of the religions, they have very low star ratings. The Jehovah's Witnesses have a zero rating here in Canada for helping in other countries when it comes to starvation and the poor. And then they have the balls to talk about, we're living in the time of the end when, we're going to see food shortages or earthquakes. But and Jesus said, help the poor, feed people, don't print literature. But very well done. We can't wait for the last one. These children are turning on the dad. I like that point. Like, there were some really good points. We have a 40-hour work week. And if you're in the Netherlands, I think that's down to like a 35-hour work week or less. So all over the world, we're figuring out how to work better together. Comment. A transfusion is a tissue transplant. How can blood save your life? 1990, page 8. So that's right in the Watchtower. Regarding the transplantation of human tissue or bone from one human to another, this is a matter for conscience decision by each one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Watchtower, March 15th, 1980, page 31. Thank you very much, Frank. So there you have it. It's logged in here. You can use this stuff if you want to talk, if you have relatives. I think this is really important if you have family that's affiliated with the Jehovah's Witnesses and they're making life and death decisions based on these 9 men. And then there's just a ton of information in here that shows that this organization is just guessing. They're just suspecting, or they're trying to make something out of nothing. They're trying to control people, obviously. And they're selling literature. They're selling their movie theater now. So this is big business under the camouflage of religion. And Frank's done a really good job here.
Rights for women, or
And,
child labor laws.
And
like,
as for
who would want to live back? Like there's no, like brought out in the video here, we have all these child rights for women and everything. We're in a better place in society than we have. And that's why we're doing the Be Free 2023 here, because we want to bring an end to this child abuse all over the world. I think XGW Diaries, Justin was brought up in our last live. This isn't just because of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we're not going there and labeling them, but this is about putting an end to child abuse, hiding crimes within religions. We feel that's wrong. When we get out, it's very easy to have that strong conviction because it is wrong, and we're building for a better earth. And that's kind of what Gloria is talking about here in this video.
for preaching, the Bible says that had already been accomplished back in the 1st century, prior to 70 CE.
That good news that you heard and that was preached in all creation under heaven. Colossians 1 verse 23.
So that sign was already fulfilled and doesn't require any further fulfillment.
Much
I
less
thought
by
that was
Jehovah's Witnesses preaching their false prophecies.
Then I'm crossing out the signs card. Next is the generation card. But we're out of time for this episode. We're going
Okay, so yeah, so that's great, Frank. So next we'll be looking for the next episode. That'll be the last, I understand. And does this mean that you're not going to be doing this no more, Frank? You're retiring. Are you hanging up your hat? So that's what I heard. That's what my good wife was saying. So we'll be looking forward to your next one. That's coming out next week, is it? And I think so, or in a week or two. We'll advertise it. So we really appreciate having this opportunity. So Frank says pretty much yes. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. So Frank has done, if you guys haven't looked at Frank's website, we'll do a little commercial here for next week, advertising some of the work that he's done. But he's been with the community for how long, Frank? Since 2011? I think so. That's what I was seeing on some of your blogs, going way back to that time frame. So a lot of years. That's 12 years. 12 years doing this for the community, helping us to wake up, helping us to all realize that we've been all fooled all those years. So it's great information. I've used a lot of Watchtower Help Admin's blogs, and I've used them on my videos. And anybody else out there that's a creator that wants to use this stuff, that Frank has done this for us, for all of us, to help us wake up from the Watchtower. So Frank says before 2011, but outside of the internet, he's been involved in working with the XJW community, helping us all to get a real better understanding of the Bible and history and how this all comes together and how we've all been hooped or fooled by the Watchtower. So it is what it is. But like I said on one of my other videos, for a lot of us, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing now if we weren't in the Watchtower. We wouldn't be able to help people like we are now. And that's a good feeling within itself. So I think we're going to close the program here. We thank everyone for being on with us, and stay tuned with us. We're going to be featuring Frank's last video, and Frank might even come on live, maybe not. We'll invite you on live if you want to come on live. You don't have to show your face. You can make a little icon on StreamYard, and my good wife comes on like that. So it's really up to you. You can even get voice synthesizers, I think. I don't have one. I don't know anything about that stuff. But you would, because you made all these movies and you know how to make voices come out in people's mouths talk. So I'm sure you could make whatever you want happen. But anyways, we invite you on, Frank. Now, my good wife is on. She wants to say something. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in, and thank you again, Frank. I can't wait to see what you have in store for us next week. So have a good one till then, and I hope we're okay for same time, same place next Saturday. And don't forget, everybody, we're live Tuesday for the Be Free protest. So saw today that Goat-like Personality is going to be there. Wally is on his way there. MJ is on his way. That should be a good turnout. So hopefully we bring you some footage of that. So thank you guys again for today, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Okay, well, thanks again. And the Be Free's coming up, so we want to be there morally supporting. We're hoping to run live all for the whole program, the whole Be Free. And so that we'll be looking forward to it. And it's important for us to have a voice, and we can how we can have a voice. Maybe we can't go to the Be Free, but we can share videos. We're online. We can we can look into sharing. We've done videos with schools. Caleb and Sophie. It's a danger to the schools. Those are really good videos to share to the schools and let them know what's going on with these kids. And we're hoping to do something on about Halloween, explaining Halloween. We've only heard one side of this whole Halloween story, and I think we gotta. It's important on this side of the fence that we get both sides of the story. We get the rest of the story, and that's what Frank did for us on all of his videos that he's put out. We want to thank Frank, and we want to thank you guys as the audience, and share Frank's information with others, families, friends, anybody that can benefit, and they can get onto the blogs and certainly wake up just doing that within itself. Okay, so here's our outro. It'll be a protest outro. Here it is. We're going to Be Free. We'll see you there.